show.
Welcome to episode 146 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. He's Lepore, I'm Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. Since our last podcast, the Leafs hired a new head coach. Craig Berube is your new head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, so we will give you our thoughts and opinions on that. Also, some juicy news. Berube and Mitch Marner spotted on a coffee date together in Toronto, so we will dig into that as well. It's a viral pic that's been going around. We'll give you some more Mitch Marner thoughts in terms of what we think the Leafs should do with him moving forward. And then we will also discuss the conference finals and the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Rangers are up 2-1 on the Panthers at the time of recording, and the Stars are up 2-1 on the Edmonton Oilers. So we have a lot to get into, and I promise you want to stay tuned until the very end of this episode because it's going to be a juicy one. But before we get into all that, it is time to officially welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How you doing today, man?
Anthony Bruno, as always, so happy to be here to be recording a pod. Conference finals, man. Exciting stuff. We got two good series. I think both these ones might go all the way, so that's awesome. Bruno, quick question. Have you ever injured yourself while cooking?
While cooking, no. Actually, does this count, Lepore? I was putting pizza in the oven once and threw out my lower back. Does that count as injuring yourself while cooking?
What an athlete. You're putting the pizza in the oven and put out your back?
One of the most embarrassing moments, I think, of my life. Yeah, that happened once. I was putting pizza in the oven, threw out my lower back. I was out for like a good 3 or 4 days. Yeah, pretty pathetic, but I guess it happens to the best of us.
Yeah, I wouldn't be telling people that, let alone announcing it on a podcast. Well, the reason why I bring it up, Bruno, but your boy yesterday was cutting some carrots, and I took a chunk out of my finger. My wife bought me, I don't know how to describe it. It's like this handle thing, and it's got the wedges. You can make like wedge fries, right? And I'm doing it, and it just slipped and flap, and it was like a clean cut. Lepore is very fortunate because it just got me on the tip. Had that gone like half a centimeter more down, whatever, I don't think we'd be recording. I'd be recording from the hospital, man, with a bandage around my finger. And apologies if people are queasy, but so much blood. Like just so much blood. And everyone comment down below. You go online and there's all the tips on how to get it to stop bleeding. The most common thing I saw was hold it above your heart, like hold it up and just pressure. And I was doing that and it just kept gushing. I couldn't get it to stop. Finally, it seemed to die down a bit, but then I went to take a shower and it seemed to be okay. And then when I stopped, the shower stopped. It was bleeding like crazy. I had to get my wife to she had to help me out because I couldn't grab a towel. It's just blood everywhere. It's like a murder scene at the Lepore house after cooking some carrots.
What a disaster.
Yeah,
oh my God,
Lepore. I'm a mess falling apart over here.
Neither of us can go in the kitchen. Like, what the hell? I'm throwing out my back, putting pizza in the oven. You're freaking almost heading to the hospital after cutting carrots. The hell is going on here, man?
We should get a Skip the Dishes sponsorship so we can just order all the time.
Oh my God. To all of GFP Nation, be careful out there when you're in the kitchen cooking up a storm. My goodness. Mm-hmm. All right, Lepore. Well, I'm glad you're okay. But we gotta dig into this episode here because we got some juicy topics to get to. So it's interesting because when we released our last episode, like literally less than 24 hours after that episode went out, the Leafs actually officially hired Berube. Mm-hmm. Even though we talked about Berube on the podcast, you even had some inside info that the Leafs were hiring Berube, and you were, of course, correct again. When Lepore comes out with these nuggets of information, it's pretty impressive, man. You're a poor man's Elliot Friedman at this point. Well done.
No problem.
But what are your thoughts? I mean, again, I know we kind of went over this already, but I'll throw it to you first just to get your thoughts now that we've had, a number of days to digest this. that Craig Berube is the new head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah. This is such a hockey thing, but what's annoyed me since the hiring is how fans and media are using all these cliche words and cliche statements regarding the type of team that Berube's going to build and the type of style this team's going to play. And it frustrates me. It really frustrates me because I see it as bullshit. And what I mean by that is they're telling you what you want them to say, right? They're sitting there and they're like, okay, what does the Leafs Nation and Leafs media want to hear right now? That's what we're going to say. It's so easy. I'm going to get up. I'm going to get up there. I'm hired as the new head coach of Toronto Maple Leafs. And I'm just going to say, I want a team that's really fast, has a lot of tenacity, and just destroys their opponent. Oh my God, this guy's amazing. Like, it's like political stuff, man. It's just tiresome. I said last week when we recorded that I will never get excited about a coach or GM and probably not a player ever again. And I stick by that. I mean, you want to build that type of team. You're going to have that type of style of play. Show me. And furthermore, let's see if it works. Building a team that's tougher doesn't necessarily translate to wins. And I heard people talking on the radio today about the 4 teams left in the conference finals, and Adam Fox. And I think you have to take this with a grain of salt because there's some fugazi that goes on with this stuff. But Adam Fox is the only defenseman on any of those 4 teams that's listed under 6 feet tall. And he's obviously an amazing player, and anyone would take Adam Fox. But it just to fuel that thing of like, oh, you got to be big and you got to be tough. And I don't know, man. Just to me, it's funny because we had a really bad end to the season. The way the season ended fucking sucked. And I don't know if I've ever been so looking forward to the next season starting just to see what exactly this team's going to be. Years past, we kind of knew. We have this situation here where we have a new coach. There's 2 high-profile players that everybody wants out the door, and we have a long list of UFAs and RFAs. So my hands are in the air. I have no idea what this team's going to look like. We'll get a better look at it, I'm sure, as the draft comes and July 1st and that stuff. But I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this stuff from the coaches, the management, the heads of MLSE. What was the exact quote again? What, like, anything other than winning is unacceptable? Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
from Keith Pelly. It was something along those lines.
Yeah, just again, you say it. I mean, you're paid to say that, and I get it. But it drives me nuts how people are just eating it up. Like, have we not been through enough that we should be? I don't want to say I sound like a pessimist right now. I'm just saying, don't fall sucker to them telling you what you want to hear. It's too easy. It is too easy.
Well, you said it, man. They're politicians up there, really. I mean, that's what they're doing, especially when it comes to Keith Pelly, Brendan Shanahan, and Brad Treliving. Mm-hmm. I mean, at the end of the day, 2 of them are hockey executives and one's the president of MLSE, but they're also politicians as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I fucking hated? Actually, you know what quote I hated? I don't even remember who said it. We're not in the business of selling jerseys. And now it's like the big quote around Leafs fans. I go, there's about selling jerseys and high profile players. MLSE, all you're about is selling jerseys. You're a money machine. People can make fun of the Toronto Maple Leafs as much as they want for their on the ice product and how embarrassing it's been for the last half century. But if there's one thing they're good at is marketing and making money. So I just, again, telling people what they want to hear. And I kind of want it to puke.
Yeah, I wasn't very inspired by the Craig Berube press conference. And I said it on our last episode, that I couldn't get really excited about Berube joining the team. And I'm still not very excited that he's the new head coach. And one of the main reasons is that we've seen this before. We saw this with Mike Babcock. There was a ton of hype with Mike Babcock. He came in, the Leafs gave him $50 million. He won a Stanley Cup with the Red Wings, 2 gold medals with Team Canada. He was considered the best coach in the NHL. The biggest name out there, and the Leafs got him. Where did that get the Leafs?
Mhm.
Absolutely nowhere. And I'm not saying that they're the exact same coach, but there's a lot of similarities. They're both known as quote unquote hard asses, right? As opposed to being a player's coach, which you could say that Sheldon Keefe fell more into that category, right? So the Leafs have now gone from a hard ass who's all about like discipline and accountability. How many times did we hear accountability during that press conference? Speaking of how those guys were up there as politicians, all you heard was accountability. Now all of a sudden, there's going to be accountability across the board with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, just bullshit that they're spewing out that they want Leafs Nation to eat up here. But we saw this with Babcock. They went from a hard ass in Babcock to more of a player's coach who was analytically driven in Sheldon Keefe, especially when you think about his partnership with Dubas. And now that didn't work. And now they're going back to the hard ass in Craig Berube, who played, I believe he played over 1,000 games in the NHL. He had a ton of fights. I mean, he fought Brendan Shanahan. That
Yeah.
clip has been going around.
He was in the Gilmore trade. People forget that.
Yeah. He was in the
Yeah.
Gilmore trade. Just a well-respected guy in the hockey world. He's
Yeah.
played the game. He's coached obviously at the highest level, winning a Stanley Cup with the Columbus or with the St. Louis Blues rather. And you know, when you talk to any player, like I heard even like Scott Hartnell, one of his former players in Philadelphia,
Mhm.
speaking on the radio in Toronto recently, and he was saying like everyone loves Berube. Like you'll run through a wall for that guy.
Okay,
You know, he's a
that's good.
funny guy. Like, you know, even though he's a hard ass, the players really respect him. So again, I understand that he's well respected and he has a great resume in hockey, but I just can't get excited about it because we've already seen this. Like, what is he going to do in terms of like pressing the right buttons for the star players that we haven't already seen? Like Matthews has already, you know, had a 69 goal season. He's won a Hart Trophy. Mitch Marner has been a two-time first-team All-Star. William Nylander's coming off a career season. Like these guys have already accomplished some pretty amazing things, at least individually. So I don't know what he's going to do in terms of like pressing the right buttons to get them over the hump in the playoffs. Because at the end of the day, I still think this is a roster construction issue. I don't
Mhm.
think it's necessarily like Berube is going to come in and all of a sudden he's this wizard who's going to press all the right buttons and all of a sudden like Matthews and Marner and everyone's going to buy into this new system and they're going to win all these playoff games. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it's
Mhm.
more an issue of roster construction and getting that figured out as opposed to this coach coming in now and, you know, all of a sudden leading this team to a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I mean to that point, like I touched on, we have a lot of money to spend, so we'll see, you know, where that goes with regard to tenacity and grit. Bruno, so like we're both on the same page here, saying Berube is not going to excite us. And actually, little tidbit here. So my mother-in-law's from Montreal, and she said it's pronounced Berube. Like, okay, all right, sure, sounds cooler. Anyways, so we're on the same page saying
Berube.
Berube. Should we start that on the show? Make it just
I
keep
think we
calling him that.
should actually. Hey, if that's how you actually pronounce it.
Yeah, keep
Like
confusing
that.
everyone. Who they talking about? Who's Leafs new coach?
Berube.
So neither of us are excited. How much of it, like what percentage of the pie is it because it's him or just any head coach? And we all know that Todd McClellan interviewed for the position. Okay. Had the Leafs hired McClellan, would you be more excited, less excited, or equally not excited?
Equally not excited. And
So exactly
probably
the same.
because he's just another recycled name. It's like it's the same song and dance, just another recycled guy who's been around the block. Yeah, I can't really get excited about any of these guys.
Okay, but you wouldn't be. Are you higher on Berube than you would have been on him, or it doesn't matter?
No, not necessarily. I think, and we talked about this on the last show, there's only like a couple names out there that would get me really excited at this point. And I think one of them we both agreed on was John Cooper. Like, I think that would get people really excited. But I mean, man, there's really not a lot of names out there, at least of guys who are available, who you're like, oh my God, this is incredible. Maybe Joel Quenneville.
Yeah,
He's
we
maybe
weren't
the
doing
other
that.
guy that I could have got a
Yeah.
little bit more excited about, but it almost didn't matter who they brought in. I wouldn't be, you know, so excited that I can't even sleep at night that this guy's now coaching the Leafs.
Dan Bilesma hired the other day by Seattle. Would you care?
Would not care at all.
Exactly the same. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. It just
Okay,
flat out doesn't matter. Again, unless it was John Cooper. I think he's like the one guy who I would have been like, holy shit, the Leafs got John Cooper. Let's go.
Yeah. It's kind of depressing the state we've succumbed to. Bruno, just not being excited about anything. New coach, whatever.
It's time for a quick break for a word from Manscaped. Fellas, I can guarantee that you haven't bought your father a gift yet for Father's Day. Shame on you. I mean, I haven't even bought a gift yet, so I guess shame on me as well. But that is why Manscaped is here. The leaders in below the waist grooming are here to help us out. Maybe your dad has had a bush since the 70s, and that's okay, because our friends at Manscaped have crafted the total package for his special day. Whether it's for the boys downstairs, his beard, or even a pair of underwear, Manscaped has all the bases covered. So head over to Manscaped and get 20% off and free shipping using our exclusive code GFP20. Lepore, have you gotten a Father's Day gift yet?
No, nothing for Franco yet. I still have to work on it. But gentlemen, if you are a loyal listener of this podcast, you've heard Bruno and I go off about how amazing Manscaped products are. So we know you are well taken care of. But why not pass on the love to your dad on Father's Day with some Manscaped products? Manscaped.com. Throw it all in the cart. GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping.
Fellas, your father is going to get a lot of gifts on Father's Day that he probably doesn't care about. But if he gets something from Manscaped, oh, baby, is he going to be happy, because these products are just incredible, as Lepore mentioned. So listen, go to manscaped.com and get 20% off and free shipping using our exclusive code GFP20. That is code GFP20 for 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com, and your father is going to be very, very happy. It's time for an important message from BetterHelp, a sponsor of today's episode. Sometimes in life, we go through difficult times, whether that's personally, whether that's in a relationship, and your mental health cannot be ignored. And a lot of times, you can't tackle these situations by yourself. You need help. And that's where BetterHelp comes in. They make therapy easier and much less intimidating for a lot of people. BetterHelp lets you have therapy sessions as a phone call, video chat, or even messaging, whatever is most comfortable for you. BetterHelp will connect you with one of 30,000 therapists in their network, and in most cases, you'll be connected with a therapist within 48 hours. So go to betterhelp.com/GFP for 10% off your first month of therapy. Lepore, this service is incredible.
It is incredible. Anthony Bruno, mental health is something that's very serious. And be aware, if you're going through a dark time, you do not have to try to beat this thing alone. There are services out there that can provide you with some great help. BetterHelp is number one when it comes to that. As Bruno mentioned, there are different ways you can get in touch with people, different ways you can contact people. It's all up to you. Go to betterhelp.com/GFP.
Join 4 million people who have used BetterHelp to live healthier and happier lives. So go to betterhelp.com/GFP for 10% off your first month of therapy to connect with a therapist and see if BetterHelp is right for you. It's a tough situation right now, and that brings us into our next topic, because we saw, and I alluded to this off the top of the show, there is a photo going around of Craig Berube and Mitch Marner meeting up in a coffee shop in Toronto. And I believe that the photo is actually from last week. I don't think we have like an exact date. And maybe if we dig through social media, we'll be able to find out the exact, date that this meeting took place. But I'm sure Berube has been having one-on-one meetings with all the star players, and not just the stars, but a lot of the guys on the roster. And obviously it makes a ton of sense to go meet up with Mitch Marner, GTA boy. He's one of the top 2 or 3 players on the team, obviously. His future with this team is still to be decided. And those two met up for coffee, and who the hell knows what they talked about. And now people are speculating, what does this mean for Mitch Marner? Because people thought, as soon as Berube came in, based on the way he coaches, is as if everyone's like a a pro in terms of like understanding exactly how all these guys coach and the
Yeah.
exact teams and players that they want. It's like, get out of here. But anyway, everyone's like, oh, Berube's in. Now that means that Mitch Marner's out the door because he plays this north-south game. And, Mitch Marner, 100-point player who's like a Selke Trophy candidate. He can't play for Craig Berube. God forbid. So what are your thoughts on this photo and this meeting that took place between these two?
First question: who pays for the coffee? Or Berube already have the Leafs credit card and it goes on the Leafs credit card?
That's a good question. You would think Berube, considering he's the head coach, would maybe pick that up. But Mitch Marner, the guy's making almost 11 sheets a year, so I'm going to go with Mitch. I think Mitch picked up the coffee.
Yeah, Craig's not making that much, unfortunately for him. Yeah, so they had a meeting. People are going to dissect this how they want. If I'm being perfectly honest with the listeners out there, I think this points to, and this is not necessarily a desire on my end, I think this points to Mitch Marner starting the season with the Toronto Maple Leafs, because both these sides have hard decisions to make. Number one, full stop. Do they want Mitch Marner? And on Mitch's side, does he want to be a Toronto Maple Leaf? Okay. On the side of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and let's face it, this is not Berube's decision. If they do not want him around, would they have had this coffee? Like, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. Now, I'm not saying it 100% means like he wants him to stay and he wants him to be a Leaf long term. I just mean he at least is like, you know what? I'm open to the idea. I want to hear him out. I want to hear what he has to say. I want him to, maybe Berube wants him to explain himself. Like, I mean, to be a fly on the wall in that conversation, can you imagine? I mean, Mitch, clearly your playoff numbers don't match your regular season numbers. What gives, man? Talk to me. Talk to me. And I don't think it points to anything else other than the fact that the Maple Leafs and Berube are open to the idea of Marner sticking around and at least starting the season with the Leafs. And they might change their mind. He might have, maybe Berube left that meeting and he was like, you know what? I don't want this fucking kid at all. So what Mitch wants is irrelevant, but I don't think it can mean the opposite. I mean, people saying like, oh, Berube had his arms crossed, like, oh, miserable he is. Like, hey, give me a break. Everyone's like a physical psychologist now. But I don't think that meeting would have happened if the Leafs had already decided that he's gone. So that's all I'm taking for it. And to be fair, I didn't think they were there before I saw photos of this meeting. I think there's a lot of stuff to unfold here. His bonus is due on July 1st. I mean, that's relevant to the situation, but who knows? I mean, we'll find out. We'll find out in a hurry. We will. And again, another reason why I'm excited for the season to start, for things to get rolling.
No, it's a good point. I think if Mitch Marner was out the door and there was an understanding from both the Leafs and from Marner's camp that this just isn't going to work out, I don't think he would have wasted his time meeting with Craig Berube, like straight up. So I think that's a great point. And I know it sounds like overly simplistic to say that, but yeah, if this dude was out the door, I don't think he'd be taking the time to meet with the new head coach. So I agree. I mean, I think we're at a point now where Marner is going to be back and at least start the season with the Leafs. And who knows, maybe they'll trade him at some point. Maybe it's going to play out like the Nylander situation where he waits to sign an extension. One interesting thing I've thought about and even seen a little bit on social media, like the Leafs probably would have been in a better spot if they had just signed Nylander in the offseason. Because the season started, right, and he was playing so well. He was on that incredible pace. All of a sudden, the dude, gets this massive raise, and it was a lot more than people originally thought. Should the Leafs consider just signing Mitch Marner right now in case he goes out in the first 2 months of the season and leads the NHL in scoring and has a career year?
But Mitch has to sign that deal too, Bruno. That's the problem.
That's fair.
And I think his camp shall be thinking what you're thinking. Do you see that take by Biz? He went off on Spin Chicklets. Like, he thinks the Leafs should just play out the year with him. Get Mitch Marner on a contract year for 1 year, and whatever happens, happens. What do you think about that?
I don't love that because God forbid this guy walks for nothing. That would be a
Eh,
colossal failure, man.
does that matter anymore?
I think it does because listen, you're going to lose the trade, I think, no matter what. And it just seems like everyone is so pissed off at Mitch Marner that they just want to trade him for like, rocks on the side of the road at this point. But I mean, come on here. Like you got if you're gonna make a trade, you can't just trade him because you're all pissed off and you think that he sucks in the playoffs and he doesn't have heart. Like at the end of the day, this is a phenomenal two-way player who's one of the top, as I said, 20 to 25 players in the league. If listen, you got to try to make the best trade possible, but more likely than not, you're going to lose the trade, right? But you still got to get something for him. You can't let this guy walk. And I understand the valuable thing here is also the cap space, but I have said this multiple times now. I think you just got to get Tavares off the books. And whether you convince him now to move his no movement clause or to waive his no movement clause, or you wait for the season to play out with JT, that's the play here. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I would move forward with Matthews, Nylander, and Marner locked up long term, all within a year in age of each other, and have Tavares off the books instead of like rushing and trading Marner now for maybe a deal that's not going to make a lot of sense, and then still having Tavares off the books, and then finally getting him off the books, and then having this addition. Like, I'm moving forward with Matthews, Marner, Nylander, waiting for Johnny T to get off the books, and then that's when I'm going to like really dig into this and rebuild the team. And even if it takes a year and we're all pissed off because next year isn't like the ideal season and the ideal roster construction, I'm okay with that because I don't want to rush into things and make a stupid decision just because we're all emotional and everyone hates Mitch Marner.
You really don't want him traded, eh?
No, I think it would be a mistake, man. Again, unless it's like a home run deal,
It's
the
not going to
Leafs
be
are
one.
losing this deal basically 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. My point before, like asking if it matters anymore what you get in return, what are you going to get? I mean, you're going to get a first round draft pick, a prospect. You're going to get maybe an actual first round pick. But the team that wants Mitch Marner, especially as a maybe rental, is going to be a competitive team. So then what pick are you getting? And what prospects do they have? I don't know. I haven't made my decision on this thing, like I've said a million times, but I don't hate what Biz said about just have Marner for the year and we'll see what happens. And if he signs or doesn't sign, I don't know. So like right now, if you were the Toronto Maple Leafs and Marner said he was willing to do Willie's deal, you'd be like, hey, let's stamp it.
Yeah, I'd lock him in. If he wants to sign the same deal as Nylander, if he's willing to do that and doesn't try to get greedy here and want a massive raise, I'm locking him into basically the same deal as Nylander.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and because
The hate's
listen, I think
flowing,
it's
Bruno.
unrealistic to think that he's gonna sign for anything less than Nylander.
No, he's not.
Considering when you look at their track record and their resumes, like Marner has a better resume than Nylander does, even
Mhm.
though Nylander's coming off a better season and he's scored 40 goals in back-to-back seasons. I still think Marner has a better resume in total, right? So, we can't bash Marner if he's like, well, I deserve maybe a little bit more than Nylander, but I think we can draw the line in the sand if he wants like 1,500,000, 2 million more than Nylander. That's when you got to kind of draw the line. But if they're going to sign for identical contracts, I think you lock it up, man.
Yeah. See, and I think that's where the Leafs come in, and it's not even about the player anymore. We're just not going to do that. We're not going to have a player at, what's Matthews, 13.25, 11.5, another guy at 12.5. They're not going to. I think from the team building perspective, like you touched on minutes ago, you're doing the same thing. You're rolling the same thing out, even if you do get JT off the books. And then how I pointed before, the percentages will be better, and we'll see how that plays out. But I I think I just don't think we're going to see a trade. I just don't see a trade happening in this one. And if I had to bet what's going to happen, I would say he signs. I would say he signs a long-term deal. Would you even negotiate with Marner about a shorter term deal?
I mean, you could, but listen, if he wants to sign at a reasonable number, I would just lock the guy up long term.
Right. But if he wants like a Matthews, like 4 years, 5 years, would you throw
No,
shit
if
at
he's going to
that?
try to get greedy and he wants like a 4-year deal at a higher cap hit, that's probably where I also draw the line as well here. It's like, let's stop getting greedy. Let's lock something in that's a little more team friendly. But you know what, Lepore, at the end of the day, the Leafs are the ones who fucked this up, not Mitch Marner. I mean, all those initial contracts that these guys signed, that's where they fucked up. Because you go look at like Florida, for example. Kachuk is making 9.5, Barkov's making 10. I mean, look at the Rangers guys. I know Panarin signed as a free agent, but you go down the list and it's like all these guys, and we've talked about this on so many different episodes. All the other star players that signed after the Leafs signed their original deals all didn't sign for as much as we all thought they would. And now these Leaf guys are still like, the highest paid guys in the league, and now they're coming into their next contracts. And it's like, what the hell are we supposed to do now? Because in an ideal world, like, don't you think Leaf fans would feel a hell of a lot better if Marner was making like 9 million?
Oh my God, Bruno, like 100 for sure.
Like,
That
isn't
was
that
the
crazy? That's less than 2 million more per year than he makes now. But I think it would be a completely different feeling around him if that's what he was
yeah, but
making.
that is significant, Bruno. That is significant, Bruno. It's almost 20% more if you think of it that way. And man, I remember someone said to me a while ago, it was a few years ago, looking at Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, he said, if they all sign for 1 million less, even 1 million less, like how differently the optics of everything would look. But that's just what happened. And you touched on it's the Leafs' fault. If you want to say it's been a super bad thing for them to have these guys at these cap hits. But it's gonna be hilarious, Bruno. We haven't seen the last of like this Craig Berube thing, and you can see you go on YouTube, the networks are eating it up. The networks are eating it up. You're just seeing all these thumbnails of Berube meets with Marner. What does it mean for the Leafs? Does Mitch want to submit his 10-team no trade clause or whatever? Like it's just they are taking full advantage because everyone's got a hard opinion on this, and you're in two camps now. You're either waving a flag for Mitch Marner, or you want to pay for his Via Rail ticket out of Toronto.
Yeah, and like the other thing I look at, Laporte, it's like last time I checked, all the teams left in the Stanley Cup playoffs, they all have really good players on their roster. I know that might be the most
Yeah.
obvious statement I've ever made,
Huh?
but holy shit, they all have good players on their roster. So can we just like stop and think logically about this for a second? You need good players to win championships. Stop being mad at one guy because he had a bad playoff series. And I know it wasn't his only bad playoff series, but in the grand scheme of things, Mitch Marner is still kind of on the younger side. I get that he's a veteran player now. Him and Matthews have been around for 8 years. But let's just take a deep breath here. Mitch Marner can be the third or fourth best player on a championship team. If Matthews is the best player and Nylander's the second best player, don't tell me that Mitch Marner can't be the third best player on a championship team. Because the last time I checked, Florida, New York, Dallas, Edmonton, they all have great players. They don't have a bunch of like third line plumbers who are scoring all their goals in the playoffs. I know Dallas is built a little bit differently because they just have more depth. The top end guys on their roster aren't making quite as much as some of the other teams in the conference final.
That's the counterpoint, Bruno. These guys in the conference final aren't making as much. They have star players, but they're not making as much. So,
but again, that's where the Leafs fucked up. That's where they fucked up because like Barkov, Kachuk, Marner, Matthews, Nylander, like they're all the same caliber of player here. Jason Robertson, they're all the same caliber, man. Zibanejad, but those guys all make less money. And that's the difference here. But again, I don't think we should be blaming Mitch Marner. Like, blame Kyle Dubas, blame the Leafs, blame Brendan Shanahan for originally signing these contracts and getting themselves into this situation. Now, am I going to completely just like not blame anything on Marner? No, because he was a little greedy as well when he first signed that deal. But I think it's just really hard for me to like put all of this on Mitch Marner. I think it's a little unfair, and I think we're getting a little bit carried away now with like just running this dude out of town.
I think what fucked everything up And I'm guessing here. I'm trying to get inside people's heads and read what they're thinking. It was the Tavares signing, and at the time I was happy about it. But I even remember thinking shortly after, when everything had calmed down and that season started and got moving, I'm like, well, if he signed for 11, what are Marner and Matthews gonna sign for? Because they're gonna say in their camps, like, well, at the time anyway, we're at least as good and we're younger and our ceilings are higher in the next, 3 to 4 to 5 to 8 years compared to John Tavares. So I'm sure that was the discussion in the room. Like, we talk about these numbers. If Tavares signed for 11, there's no planet does Marner sign with the same team for 8.5 or 9 or something. No way. Like I said, it's a significant difference. So I don't want to call that like the mistake, because that deal was significant for the organization. It was the first time they got the big fish, the Toronto kid that actually wanted to play for us. And there was a lot of symbolism to it on sort of like a changing with the Leafs and the brand. But I think for good or for bad at the time, that was the stroke that messed everything up, because these guys were not going to take less than John Tavares.
Yeah, that threw a wrench in everything, and I totally understand what the Leafs were trying to do, because they're like, wow, we're in win now mode. We have all these young guys. We add John Tavares to the mix. You have one of the best one of the best group of centermen in the NHL. It's like, we all thought that they were just going to coast through the playoffs and win multiple Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
And
I'd be
clearly,
lying. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't think they were going to win a cup.
yeah, I
Totally.
think
Like,
if you asked any hockey fan when they
yeah.
signed Tavares, I think a lot of hockey fans would have said, lock this team in for at least one Stanley Cup,
Yeah.
just based on the roster on paper.
Way to go.
But yeah, way to go, Leafs. But yeah, it's gotten to a situation here now where I think the best course of action is, for me, and I'll say it again, you wait for Tavares to get off the books and you move forward with these three guys, because the cap is going to continue going up. And here's the other thing, Lepore. For the people who think that, okay, the Marner deal, let's say you trade him or he just comes off the books entirely, and then you're allocating that 11 million to locking up Max Domi and Tyler Bertuzzi long term. If you think that's actually going to make this team better, or locking up two guys around that same skill level is going to make this team better, you've lost your mind. Like, that's what I don't want to see. I don't want to see Marner get traded or that money come off the books and then Treliving turn around and give Max Domi a 6-year deal for $5 million. Or
You
the
see
same
these
thing to Tyler
numbers?
Bertuzzi. That would be insanity.
You see these numbers that people are putting out on Domi? The
Oh, it's
guy,
fucking crazy.
the year before, did he not have like 50 or 60 points?
Yeah, and he scored 9 goals this year, Lepore.
Yeah.
9 goals
There you go.
and
So
47 points. But because he had that really good stretch playing with Austin Matthews, and he had his moments in the playoffs as well, all of a sudden now the Leafs, there's rumors they got to sign him to like a 5x5 or a 6x6 or something outrageous like that.
yeah,
That's fucking crazy.
It's such the Leaf thing. This guy had a better season 2 years ago, and it earned him a 1-year deal at $3 million. And then he had a lesser season, and now he's going to get 4 more years of term and 2 million more a year. Like, no, like, again, it's the Leafs thing, but no. And I agree with you on that regard, Bruno. And we touched on like all the guys that are going to come out of the lineup and where that money is going to be allocated. It's about value. Like, everyone who listens to the show knows how much I hate the salary cap, and we now talk about players based on value. We rank them on value, not necessarily how good they are. And that's where I get really nervous, because it's not even about getting good players. It's about getting them at value. If you get a really good defenseman, but he costs you $9 million, it's like, well, he's at replacement, because that's probably what he's worth. And you have to be better than replacement. I don't know, man.
Yeah, I'm still scared that Treliving, because again, we've seen what he's done in Calgary, and that was basically the main thing that you can base it on. But I'm still a little bit scared that he could completely botch this, because let's not forget, like, he signed Ryan Reeves, which I know he played better towards the second half of the season, and the same thing with Domi and Bertuzzi, but those signings all looked awful. The Klingberg signing was a disaster. I'm afraid that he's going to give some middle of the road guys, too much money in free agency. That's what I'm still scared of. And I'm hoping he doesn't do that. I would like to believe he's not going to do that. But I'm still scared that it could happen. And that's when you get into trouble. When you start overpaying guys in the mid tier instead of allocating that money to star players instead, that's when you can run into trouble. So we'll see how this plays out. I think that's it for the Leafs, though, Lepore. It's time to
Really quickly.
go ahead.
You mentioned Klingberg. Did you hear that? That tidbit Chris Johnston had on Klingberg about he was working out with the team. I mean,
yeah,
he said it's not out of the total.
He's going to be back.
I mean, if he's healthy, it's obvious now. He looked so bad when he was playing in that blue jersey, and then he had his hip surgery. So obviously that had something to do with it. And again, it's about value. If a healthy Klingberg is $2 million, okay, fine. But I don't know. Just
a lot more digestible than $4 million.
Yeah.
I did hear that little tidbit from Chris Johnston as well. I go, oh man,
did you see that
we're going to be back?
Did you see that whole thing where they were listing off the players and whether they'd be back? Did you agree with? I mean, obviously you don't agree with the Marner one because he said it was more than likely that he's gone. But the other guys, were you kind of on the same page as him?
Yeah, because I think when Chris Johnston is making those, when he's rating all of those players in terms of like the likelihood of them coming back, I think it's more based on like the information that he has as opposed to like what he thinks the Leafs should do. So for the most part, I was kind of on the same wavelength as him. Was there anyone that you specifically disagreed with?
I wouldn't say overly. You think Liljegren's gone? He thinks Liljegren's gone.
I know. I mean, I'm a fan of Liljegren. He's another guy where it's like everyone wants to run him out of town for whatever reason, but I'm a little bit higher on Liljegren than I think like the rest of the market is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also seemed like Chris Johnston, based on what he's heard, it seems like Liljegren's going to be out the door too.
Yeah, he had Domi sticking around, Bertuzzi likely gone. What do you say? Samsonov's off to Siberia.
Yeah, Samsonov, no chance. He said Ryan Reeves will definitely be back. I mean, I know the guy's got 2 more years left on his deal.
Yeah, whatever.
But
let's move on. This is depressing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll have a lot more to talk about because there's going to be some bombshells that are probably dropped throughout the offseason. And we will, of course, be here to cover it all. But before we close out the podcast, let's have a quick conversation about what's going on in the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. Down to the final 4. As I mentioned off the top of the show, the Dallas Stars and the New York Rangers at the time of recording both have a 2-1 series lead. Looking at the betting odds to win the Cup,
here we go.
The Dallas Stars are your betting favorites to win the Stanley Cup. And of course, the New York Rangers are right behind them since they also have a lead in the series. Where do you stand right now? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but when we last recorded, I believe you had the Dallas Stars winning the Cup.
I did. Big win for them last night. If I'm going to play Captain Obvious, the Oilers blew that one, man. How they came out flying. That game looked like it was over, but it shows the type of team Dallas has. And I wonder with teams too, if I think for most teams on the road in the playoffs, especially going into a building like Edmonton where it's everyone, like the place is going to explode, right? If they say to themselves, you know what, even if we're down by 1 going into the second, so like I've heard different pros talk about it, and when they're asked about, does the crowd really pump you up and the home ice and all that, and they say it does for the first 5-10 minutes. Like when everything settles down, but you do feel that adrenaline. So I often wonder if certain teams are okay being down a goal going into the second on the road. Like, hey, we're fine. We got through that first period only -1. And even Dallas, maybe -2 was okay for them. Well, apparently it was because they didn't seem bothered. But I think a lot of blame has to be put on the Oilers, man. Like you are up 2-0 at home in a playoff game. A chance to really put your foot on the throat of the Dallas Stars, because then Dallas pretty well has to win game 4. But props to the Stars. Props to Jason Robertson for shutting everyone up after the cold streak he's been on. But this may sound, I don't know if this is like hot takey, Bruno, with regard to this series. And I never thought I would be saying this. Connor McDavid has to be better. he's got to be better. And that, to me, that's a compliment to him because my expectations of him are so high. And I think he has the ability to carry this team. And let's face it, like when we talk in the playoff preview about teams and what they'll need to do to win, right? Like say the Rangers, for example, we all would have said, well, Shesterkin's going to be the man. Like if the Rangers win the cup, we would have said the same thing about Bob. If it was the Leafs, we would have said, well, the core forward is just going to go bananas. If someone told me the Oilers were going to win the Stanley Cup, I would have said, well, what's McDavid going to get? Like 40 points or something, 45 points. That would just be my expectation of him. And again, it's a compliment to him because I believe he could do it. I just think for them to beat these teams that are deeper than them and have a lot of advantages over the Oilers, and let's face it, even the biggest Oilers fan in the world, Dallas has a better D. No argument. They have a better goalie. No argument. And even in terms of forward depth, you could be like, yeah, pretty well, it's a slam dunk Dallas if you want to talk about the totality of the forwards. But Draisaitl and McDavid have to carry this team. McDavid's been good. He's always good, but I just think he's got to get that extra gear for them to overcome this Dallas Stars team. And the extra gear for him is a level that nobody else on the planet can get to. So maybe I'm asking too much, but even his confidence, you tell me, Bruno, what you're seeing. I've noticed a few times watching in the last couple games, he's overpassing. He's in decent shooting positions. He's laying it off like the Mitch Marner syndrome. I hate to say that out loud, but like, could his confidence be low? Like, again, that's crazy to say, but there was a couple times I'm like, Connor, would you shoot it? And like, he's like lay it off in the slot or put it back to the D. I don't know. It's confusing, but McJesus has to be McJesus for this team to win, and he can't be passing off when he should be shooting.
It's kind of what happened in the regular season because he scored 64 goals last year, only had 32 this year. And up until last game, he finally had 6 shots on goal. But before that, 1 shot on goal, 4 shots on goal, 1 shot on goal, 2 shots on goal, 2 shots on goal. It's kind of been like the story of his season where he hasn't been as aggressive from like a shooting and goal scoring perspective as he was last season.
I didn't know those stats. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, like those shot numbers are pretty crazy from the best player in the league to have 2 shots or less in basically 4 out of 6 games is not great.
No.
And listen, he's still piling up points. Like him and Draisaitl still lead the playoffs in scoring with 25 points, but you would like to see a little bit more goals from McDavid. But at the end of the day, this Oilers team, they're built similarly to the Leafs, right? The difference is that the Oilers' top players are producing in the playoffs, and they always do. They typically always do compared to the Leafs guys, and that's why they're in this spot. But I think we can all agree Dallas has more depth. I think really every team in the playoffs right now has more depth than Edmonton. So if they're going to win a cup, it's obviously going to be on the backs of these guys, and they've carried them pretty far, not only this year, but in past years. And it's just a matter of like taking that next step. But yeah, like right now, I think Dallas are the favorites. Edmonton, they let an amazing opportunity get by in game 3.
Kicking the nuts.
They had to win that game. You're up on home ice, and McDavid, he was flying in that first period. It looked like he honestly finally, regained that like level 100 McDavid form, and then they blew it. They blew a lead, and now it looks like Dallas is going to take that series. So I completely agree with like where the odds are at right now. Like Dallas is the most well-rounded team left in the playoffs. I'm still sticking with the Panthers, even though they're down 2-1. I think this is actually a prime spot to bet on the Panthers to like not only win the series against New York, but win the cup as well. Like I even think of the last game that the Rangers won 5-4 in overtime. The Panthers outshot them 37-23.
Yeah, I think the numbers in the third period of like shot attempts were hilarious. How much they were in favor of the Panthers. They're good.
Yeah,
team,
I still think the Panthers and Dallas, I think, are definitely like the 2 best teams, just in terms of like the most well-rounded, 5-on-5 special teams down the board. Yeah, I'm still going to stick with the Panthers, but right now it does look like Dallas is like just a shade above everyone else, mostly because of their depth. And they have a lot of depth, but they also have star players too. Like Heiskanen's a star. Robertson, maybe he's not quite like a superstar.
He's a star player,
but he's a star. They finally got Rupe Hintz back. He missed the first 2 games against Edmonton, comes back, immediately has 2 assists. And of course, it's the game that Robertson comes back to life. So it shows you how important Rupe Hintz is. Another guy who makes, 9 million plus. I believe he makes 8 to 9 million. I could be wrong. But anyway, so yeah, I think Edmonton has their work cut out for them. But right now, I'll still stick with my prediction before the playoffs is it was going to be a Florida Edmonton Cup final. I'll stick with that because that's where I planted my flag. But it does look like Dallas is head and shoulders, or maybe not head and shoulders. They're a smidge above everybody else right now.
What's funny is I picked Edmonton and the Rangers, so we're both good. We're both good at something apparently. That Jason Robertson goal, the winner, okay, in the third period. He obviously meant to do that from the tight angle. I don't remember if he was actually below the goal line or just above the goal line. Is that a great play or just a shit fucking goal to let in if you're Skinner?
I think it's a bit of both, but I do agree with you. Like Robertson was clearly trying to do that. Like that takes skill too, to identify. Of course, like, I'm going to bank it in off the goalie's ass here. But I mean, Skinner, that's another issue with Edmonton, right? Like their goaltending is pretty sketchy. But I put a little bit more of that on Robertson being a heads up play from a great player.
Mm-hmm. Here's a weird one, Bruno. So, okay, you've picked Florida pretty well since the preseason to win the Stanley Cup. So I know you want them to win because of the massive Woodbridge ego you have. But who are you, if that didn't exist, who do you want to see win the Cup?
Who do I want to see win the Cup?
Yeah, whether it's based on fan base, organization, certain players, who do you want to see win the Cup?
Of the teams who are left?
Yes, of course. Well, if it's not left, I'd say the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like, it would be cool to see Edmonton win just because McDavid and Draisaitl would win a cup, but their fans would be insufferable. So I absolutely can't take the Oilers. At this point,
and nobody criticized that because if it was the Leafs, people would be saying the same thing. I hate when people do that.
So even though like I've actually been on the Oilers this year, whereas in past years I've been like Mr. Anti-Oilers. Even like Dallas, like I mean, Dallas is the best team right now, but it doesn't really excite me to see them winning the cup. I think the Rangers winning the cup would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, I guess it'd be pretty cool.
Like they're, huge market. They have star players. Like I think that would probably be the best for hockey, either the Rangers or Edmonton winning. So yeah, I'll say I'd like to see the Rangers win. I mean, I don't want them to win for like gambling purposes and other, hockey pools and things like that. But I think it would be pretty cool to see them win.
Yeah, the Rangers. I mean, I guess I just thought it's a 30th anniversary of the '94 team. So that's kind of a cool little thing. I'll say it, I just don't want to see Florida win like hard. I don't want to see Florida win because I think I said last week that I cheer for fan bases and I'm not going to cheer for Florida. Edmonton, to me, again, I'm going to be perfectly honest. It's a jealousy thing. I don't want another Canadian team winning. Yeah, we can't have
the Oilers winning the cup.
I think it's Dallas for me. Like I think I'd want Dallas to win just because it's similar to Vegas in the way, and even Colorado in the way that nobody really hates them. If you're not a fan of that team, like they don't have a huge, like the largest following outside of where they're from. And I think underrated storyline would be Joe Pavelski winning a cup.
Yeah, after all the years that he came up short with the Sharks.
Yeah,
and even around, the Stars for that matter.
Yeah, he's been around
years.
He's like approaching. I think they were saying the other day on the telecast, he's top 25 or top 30 now in playoff games played. Was that the stat? He's getting up there, man.
Yeah, it sounds about right. He's played a shitload of playoff games in his career. Yeah. And he's barely doing anything during this playoff run. Just shows you how deep that team is. Because last year, Pavelski, even though he was injured at a point in the playoffs, like he was still one of their leading scorers. And this year he's done nothing. And they're still in the spot they're in. It just shows you how deep that team actually is.
Yeah.
And by the way, Rupe Hintz, I just checked Cap Friendly. He makes a shade under 8.5 million. So it helps when you have Rupe Hintz, their number one center at under 8.5. Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin are their two highest paid guys because they, like Ben only has a year left on his deal after this season. He's at 9.5. Tyler Seguin at a shade under 10 million a year. And then when you lock up Miro Heiskanen to under 8.5 million, I mean, it helps when the standard is set and no one makes over 10 million, just like the Tampa Bay Lightning, that's great. But when you have guys starting to make 13 and a quarter and over 11 and this and that, that's when you run into trouble.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Anyway, is there anything else you want to get off your chest before we wrap up this podcast?
It's good to see you, Bruno. I was in Vaughan for the little guys hockey tournament. Played some good teams. Played a team from Vaughan. Played a team from Orillia. It was actually kind of cool because I'm such a hockey geek. One of the rinks was like the home of the Toronto Marlboros. So here I am, like, wow, this is where McDavid played, right? Just awesome. Bruno and I went for some pizza because, why wouldn't we? Pretty good, I'd say. Good recommendation on the part of Anthony Bruno. But I love being in that area, man. See those Italian flags waving. Here's the thing about Woodbridge, right? Woodbridge, Vaughan, that whole area. And you tell me, Bruno, I feel like no other place in Canada you see regular businesses in commercial areas. Like it seems like a total like you see warehouses, whatever, and then it's like a restaurant. It's like
it's pretty insane, Lepore. There was a bakery I went to like a couple days before you showed up. It was actually right around the corner from the hotel that you guys were at. It's just like it's all like commercial buildings, and then there's just a random bakery, and it's an incredible bakery that's just like smack dab in the middle. And it's like, what the hell is this bakery doing here? But that's Woodbridge for you, man.
Yeah, probably because the Italians 50 years ago bought that piece of commercial property. Now they can run their business out of there a la cheap. Will say highlight of the weekend, man. Highlight of the weekend, California sandwiches. Giving them a shout out on the show. I did that for a Descendant last time I was in Toronto. Everyone, even before I say it, everyone's like, oh, the veal. Yeah, the veal. A+, 10 out of 10. One of the best sandwiches I've ever had.
Yeah, it's not often that Michael Lepore makes the trek out to Woodbridge, Ontario. But yeah, it was good to see you, man. It's not very often that GFP is together in the flesh. Yeah. It only happens maybe a couple times a year.
Yeah.
So now I gotta make the trip out to Ottawa, to Senators country.
Yeah, why? Nah, I'm not hating on Ottawa. We got good places to eat, fun places to go. Even though we kind of have the reputation, I think we won the trophy for the they call us the most boring city in the world. I think it even
won in the world, not just Canada, the world.
Yeah, and I know we were definitely on the list for the worst dressed. We were voted one of the worst dressed cities in the world. So, and hilarious that Montreal's 2 hours away. So like Montreal is one of the party capitals of the world, fashion capital, like all that stuff, like DJ stuff, food, art, all that. And you drive down the highway and you have one of the worst cities in the world, according to these rankings. But I love where I'm from. I'll fight for it.
Wow, your city's boring. You can't dress. You can't play hockey.
I know.
Holy cow, the city of Ottawa has nothing going for it at this point. Besides Michael Lepore being there. I mean, other than that,
an old
not
arena
much going for Ottawa at this point.
An old arena nobody wants. What are we even doing here, man? Frig.
You might have to move to Woodbridge, Ontario, Lepore.
Maybe the Senators will move. Maybe the Senators will move to Woodbridge.
Honestly, wouldn't be a bad idea.
Wouldn't
be a bad idea.
I'm making local people angry here, Bruno. Let's shut this down.
Yeah, time to shut her down. That's going to do it for episode 146 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast, hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. Listen, if you're a longtime listener or a first-time listener and you really enjoyed this episode, it would be amazing if you give us a 5-star rating and review on either Apple or Spotify. And if you're watching us on YouTube and you really enjoyed the content, we would appreciate it so much if you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, consider leaving a comment down below as well. That always helps. And ring the notification bell if you want to know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. So for Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno. Stay tuned because we will have more Leafs news coming your way as things develop in the offseason, and enjoy the rest of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And we will talk to you very, very soon.
Thanks, everyone.